Okay, first, I want to say the grace of heaven and the virtues of our masters and the predecessors. I have this opportunity to present this class on the one of the 10 sermons from God to our children. And basically, these sermons or warnings, I guess you call it, it's basically warnings or cautions that God wrote down to when they via the handwriting, and it's basically it's something that we need to sort of know about, so that it allows us to have a better idea of what I guess God, as well as the Buddhists and saints, have wanted us to achieve, so to speak, through this this knowledge of the Tao. Okay, and so therefore, with that said, basically, I just want to start the the I guess it's called the third sermon, because this is the one that was I believe the first of the PeiDe class, or the third year class. Previous classes had done I believe the first two, and they basically discuss a little bit more about like a separate, how we how we arrived into this world. That's the first sermon, and second one will be about the idea of fact that we need once we're in this world, we need to basically bring the Tao to the people. And that the second sermon talks about the fact that we started these in the white era. Basically, we are now in the period of that we call the establishing the three realms or three worlds. Okay, and so therefore, this third sermon is basically talking about, or just emphasize what God wants to say about the Tao that is true, the principles are true, and also the mandate, equivalent to the mandate, is true. Okay, so like I said, I don't know how much background was given in the first two sermons in the second year class. And it's possible that I may sort of like try to refresh a little bit about these previous classes. And because after all, in this particular sermon, it talks about the period, the time that we came into this world, and the now it's the almost a big end of the time that we will be here in this world, due to the fact that it is now already the white period. And so therefore it is the time that we have I guess you could call it the universal salvations of the three realms or three worlds. The realm, of course, we're talking about the temporal heaven realm, the earthly realm, or the human realm, or the worldly realm, material realm, and then of course the realm of the underworld. Okay, so those are the three realms. Okay, and so therefore, basically, I'll sort of like, if there's any details that is said in the sermon that will allude to like the first one or second sermon that was done in the second year class, I'll try to elaborate a little bit more, because I'm not so sure whether those classes did to me, or did a lot of details on those particular classes. Okay, so to start out with, basically, God wants to present the fact that, yes, the whole idea of this third sermon is to present the fact that, to know the fact that, the Tao is true, the principle is true, and the mandate is true. Okay, so basically, through the handwriting, God basically through the handwriting wrote these words so that we can, have a record of it, and also be able to read it. Okay, So the great Tao is most precious. It's the most precious in that it creates all the in the universal existence, including the visible and the invisible. In other words, Tao or Lao Mu is the most supreme of all. Okay, and basically what I did is, oh wow, interesting. I saw okay, the word Mu basically, the Lao Mu basically is represented as the old mother. Okay, equivalent to the old mother, and the whole idea is the fact that uh, the mother is written in a certain way that okay, in a certain way that it's sort of like the right angle of the word mother. Okay, all right. So therefore, okay, and then it talks what it's trying to say is the fact that the Tao is basically encompasses everything. It is what we see as the physical world as well as the spiritual, if you want. That's where we call it the temporal as well as the underworld world, so to speak. And so therefore, basically, all those is encompassed within in this Tao. And of course, the Tao also has what's called the absolute heaven. And basically, that's the realm in which that it I guess you could say it's the whole. I don't know how to put it in a different way, but it's really just a whole. Because after all, um, within these sub-realms or sub-worlds, if you want, basically it encompasses all of it. Okay, so therefore, the three realms that we're talking about, which is the realm of the celestial, the material or worldly, okay, and the underworld, basically it's all within this whole circle, so to speak. All right, because after all, there's some there's I guess you could say a saying, no, not a saying, but it's a drawing basically that's used to specify, like there's when you're looking at mathematics, you have sets and subsets, and then also the whole thing that encompasses everything. So yeah, that's basically what it is. Okay, so then the whole idea is the fact that the Tao is real only because of the fact that, and it's trying to represent the fact that everything that we see physically as well as spirit, non earth spiritually, basically, it's all is created because of the fact that uh, Lamu or God, basic or the Tao itself, is governs all, so to speak. Okay, so just to read it quickly, as for the circulation of qi, change of the five elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, nurturing and destructive influences of each other, even the movement of celestial uh, stars and planets, the revolution of the seasons, life and death, etc. All these are created by God. It's also basically created and also determined by God. Okay, in this balanced consciousness, the Lama is the governor of all existence. Basically, that's the main idea. Okay, and the nurturing of this holy and unholy, the nurturing of the holy and the worldly arises from this Tao or Lama. Okay. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time with it, but I'll talk to about the five elements later. Okay, that's the wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, and it'll basically elaborate on that later on. Okay, so so basically now he begins to discuss about the fact that this third warning, okay, or the sermon, third sermon, which is basically these are all warnings or cautions that allows to convey to us is that we should recover our original self, because the big statement we're talking about the Buddha nature self, and it'll basically describe that a little bit more based on after we go through the text. Okay, and of course, Tao exists and is always there, even if it cannot be seen or heard. So basically, he's just emphasizing again what the Tao is. The Tao is true. The Tao is, it's true. Okay, in fact, that it has physical existence and also spiritual existence, or what we call non-existence. Okay, because after all, you read down later on in the text, it talks about the fact that from the worldly perspective, things that exist have their physical forms and can be seen, heard, etc. Okay, and what is formless can exist also. Okay, but cannot be seen or heard. Okay, it is the root of all existence and non-existence, form and formless. It is neither existence nor non-existence, neither form or formless. This is what makes it supreme and it's all powerful. And basically, that's what's it's trying to describe what the Tao is. Because after all, in terms of language, yeah, there are some limitations. Okay, and so therefore, the idea of trying to describe something, it's basically incomplete. Okay, that's the best way to say it, incomplete. Okay, so therefore, anything that basically comes within this world, okay, because after all, in science right now, in 21st century science, basically, we know about what's called, if you're in physics, you know something about what's called virtual particles. Okay, well, this is basically equivalent to what Einstein had mentioned. Yeah, many of you know what's called the formula called E equals mc squared. Okay, and basically that just means the fact that energy and physical existence, or matter, basically that's equivalent to matter, is interchangeable. So therefore, it means the fact that something can be from nothing, and also nothing can go into come to something. Okay, and basically that's what the formula talks about. Okay, and the last part, it talks about the fact that anything that has forms cater to the visible forms and things, and that which has no form is often considered void. Okay, well, the fact that we use void that's the reason why we say emptiness, so to speak. But yet in the void, you have what's called, if you're in physics, you know what is called virtual particles, and then basically the virtual particles will appear to have a form, and then it will disappear very quickly. Okay, so that's the whole idea of like the E equals mc squared. Okay, it's equivalent to that. Okay, and I don't really want to go into that into details too much about it. Okay, so therefore, the whole idea is the fact that this whole, I guess you could say, part of the scripture is talking about basically what the Tao really is. Okay, and as we know, as lecturer Kai had mentioned about the Tao Te Ching, it talks about the fact that if the Tao that can be talked about is not the true Tao, etc. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, all right. Then of course we go into a little bit more about the I guess you could say the structure of the existence that we live in. Okay, yeah, I'll call it structure. Okay, because after all, before the universe was originated or became into being, so to speak. Okay, yin and yang, who were basically the two energies. Yang solar conferred to as like solar, and yin as sort of like lunar, so to speak. Okay, and basically they were still one. Okay, so therefore there were no yin and yang at first. Okay, and the state before the universe that came into being was what's called the Hundun, or primordial ether. Okay, and that's again, that's related to the 12 periods of time. Okay, or the 12, yeah, I'll call it periods of time, because after all, a lot of the times we talk about I guess they say the time that we started the green period and the red period and then now the white period. Okay, basically we use that clock cycle and basically talks about the fact that there's 12 periods of time in a cycle. And in the Hundun is one of those periods of time. Okay, Hundun is actually let's assume, okay, we have the uh, I guess you could say the 6 o'clock position. Okay. And then once you have Hundun, then of course it has the first, that's the 12th, the sixth period. Okay. Or the 12 o'clock position, so to speak. Okay. That's the, so like the beginning, so to speak. And then you have what's called the primordial ether. Okay. And basically after that, you have what? The generation or the beginning of like the heavens, and then the second period will be the beginning of the formation. Well, formation, same thing. Formation of the physical aspect of the world and physical aspect, and then of course the third is the third aspect. The third period is sort of like the emergence of mankind, so to speak. All right, and again, if we want to go into a little bit more detail, because it determine, I mean, I don't know how much the topics that were done in the second year class talked about these things, but main thing is that there are 12 periods of time, and we are right now in the 12 to 1 o'clock position time. Okay, and based on what I mentioned about the 6 o'clock time, and that's the Hundun time. Okay, and the fact that we've been in this at least from the third time, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. Okay, and then basically that's sort of like the 12 o'clock time, and then basically that's the time that basically is sort of like the beginning of the end, so to speak. I don't want to say the exact end, but it's sort of like near the beginning of the end. Let's put it that way. Okay. And so therefore, when you have what's called, it then talks a little bit more, it discusses a little bit about it in fact that, there's this great energy, what's called the yuan qi it was right at the beginning of the um, the Hundun primordial ether time. Basically, it was like, oh, there's no sounds, or it's basically talks about soundless and odorless, which is a state of what's called Wuji, an absolute condition that is formless, nameless, boundless, and ultimately static. Okay, Wuji basically is the fact that once from the Hundun, basically it's equivalent to saying when you're like deep meditation, so to speak. Let's use the example as a deep meditation. So therefore, in the deep meditation, of course, you sort of like have a certain you arrive at a certain state of mind, and then once you begin to stir, so to speak, or to have thoughts or forms or whatever, basically that's sort of like the beginning of what's called the Wuji time. Okay, and so that's when you have formations of thought, whether it's thoughts or actions or doing things. Okay, so basically, the first after the Hundun, you have what's called the Wuji. Okay, and basically the Wuji is equivalent to, I guess you could say, it's equivalent to the one what the Tao says. The when I believe it's in chapter 5 of the Tao Te Ching, talks about the fact that Tao has one let's start with one, and one begins two, and two begins three, and which is all others. Okay, so the whole idea is that Wuji is equivalent to sort of like the one state. Okay, and basically this Wuji time, then basically, which is formless, nameless, boundless, and ultimately static, basically, it then, when the Wuji starts, so to speak, that's when we talk about afterwards the movements of Wuji started and generate the Taiji. Okay, so basically that is what God was saying about the fact that when you first have the Wuji aspect, and then after the Uji aspect, there's sort of like whether it's a period of time or some time, I'll just say some time, then you generate what's called the Taiji aspect. And the Taiji aspect then creates what's called the Liang Yi, which is equivalent to basically saying the yin and the yang. Okay, and basically that's where the yin and yang comes from, the Taiji. Okay, and then once the yin and yang begins to sort of like I guess you could say coordinate with each other, so to speak. Okay, basically that is fact that it basically brings out everything that's physical in this world. Okay, all right, and so therefore, I'll read the fact that because once the yin yang starts to separate in this process, yin went up to breathe the heavens, because after all, is the yin the yang part is sort of like the I guess you can call it the equivalent to sort of like the lighter aspect, and which basically breathes the heavens, and whereas the yin, which comes down, which is the lower or the heavier aspect, so to speak, then becomes the earth. Okay, so that's how God basically describes it. Now, of course, this interaction of the yin and yang creates all the existence in the universe, which is everything that we see in this physical realm. Okay, and of course, this also from this yin and yang, the existence in this universe that the yin and yang creates is what's called the san cai. And san cai basically just means the fact that from the human realm, we see it as the heavens, the earth, and then of course now the human being, us. Okay, and so therefore, the idea of the fact that all this comes from this principle, okay, or these principles of the Uji, Taiji, Yin Yang, Sancai, etc. Okay, basically, of course, it came from what? The original one, so to speak, or the Tao. Okay, and so therefore, what God is trying to say is the fact that yes, these are I guess you could say the steps that it goes from nothingness or the Uji, okay, to basically everything. Okay. All right. Then at the same time, yin and yang split into four forms. Four forms just means they're talking about four forms is really the I guess you could say, I'll call it the lesser and the greater. Okay. The yin and yang have both a lesser and a greater aspect. Okay, so that's the reason why they call it the four forms. Okay, it splits into four forms. There's a greater aspect, the inner aspect. Because after all, when you look at the drawing of a yin yang, okay, basically it's just a circle, and it basically splits into two. Okay, and with with the curves, and basically it has not only does it have a curve, but also it includes what's called the two dots within those circles. If one curve is black, the other one could be white, etc. So basically, it just means the fact that even within the maximum, I'll call it the maximum yin. The four forms is basically is maximum yang, maximum yin, maximum yin, maximum yang. Okay, and then the maximum, minimum yin and minimum yang. Okay, geez, gosh. All right. And so therefore, the idea is that once you have these, I guess you could say, cooperation of the yin and yang, so to speak. I don't know what to describe it. Basically, it just means the fact that it creates everything that's we have in this physical realm. Okay, and of course, the defilement also is created afterwards, because after all, once the yin and yang sort of like blend with each other, I'll call it blend with each other, it creates what's called the five elements. And so basically the wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Okay, and now when we talk about wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, really it's not really the wood itself. No, basically wood can represent something in the physical universe. In our human realm, okay, we denote wood as what is called, I guess you could say the best example is really something called that's organic. Okay. Basically means the fact that wood is sort of like also talks about the fact that there's, the wood comes from a plant that grows and basically it becomes wood. Okay. And so therefore I guess you could say, I'll call it something that's organic. And then fire basically means the fact that it's really talking about, I guess you say chemical reactions, so to speak. Okay, I guess that's a little bit easier way to understand it. And of course, Earth is basically if you heard about what's called in high school, you've heard about what's called the periodic elements of this Earth or the world, so to speak. And basically, there's like 118 to 150 elements. Well, because after all, there are other, we only talk about the protons, excluding the neutrons. But basically, there's something like about 118 elements, okay, and in the periodic elements. And basically, this just means the fact that the Earth is sort of like, it's that. It's basically that. The Earth is equivalent to that. Okay. And then, of course, metal is really a specific part of the periodic table. And they're sort of like the what's called the metalloids. And those are the aspects that's sort of like metallic in nature. Okay. And of course, water, it's not the fact that it's just water itself, but it's basically something that's fluid and also that it really should be described by what's called what we call in science as what's the three phases of water, because after all, you have liquid, solid, and gaseous. Okay, so anyway, the whole idea that wood, fire, earth, metal, and water is basically just the things that come from the equivalent to what we say, what is the periodic table. All right. Okay. And these things basically all are the functions of the yin and yang, or is created by the yin and yang. Okay. All right. So, okay. So the important thing is the fact that once you have the Tao itself, it creates everything, and then of course, we also say the principle is also true, and this principle is mystic and profound. Well, too profound to imagine. Even God says that. Okay, so it is the great truth, which is supremely and ultimately transcendental, unseen, unheard, yet it is everlasting. It transcends yin and yang, of course, because after all, it creates yin and yang, and it's also more or less, no more, no less, neither form or formless, nor formless, neither static nor dynamic. It is feelingless, odorless, timeless. It is the supreme and ultimate universal truth, which is the origin of all existence in the universe. So basically, it's just talking about the fact that, yeah, from this Tao, or the truth of Tao, or the Tao itself, basically, it derives all these things. Okay, down to the physical self, the physical aspect. Okay, all right, and then following the principle, following this principle, nature comes into existence without being forced to do so. Okay, so that's very important, because after all, everything's God still states the fact that everything seems so natural and spontaneous, such as a tremendous successful work was therefore achieved simply by following this principle. Basically, that's the principle of the Tao. Okay, and because after all, before the before well, principle is something that you can't see or say. Okay, well, you can know what a principle is, but the whole idea of the fact that all these things came into existence from the Tao, and the Tao then, through this principle, created the Uji, the Taiji, and then also yin and yang, etc. Okay, and eventually the sun sign. Okay. All right. So this puzzle can be, let's say, okay. So and then of course Tao. He also says the fact that Tao or Lao Mu, okay, basically manages this principle and can be the true governor of all the universe. It is the great soul of all souls, reaching up to heaven and down to the underworld. Things that do not follow this great truth cannot exist. So therefore, anything that doesn't have Tao, of course, will not exist, because after all, everything comes from the Tao. Okay. All right. So provided it is for the purpose of clarification and explanation, it is necessary to call God the Tao or the true one, so that the whole world can recover the original true nature in order to go back to the one. It is the true origin, okay, the Uji, the permanent root. Okay, so what he's talking about is the fact that, yeah, you know, we don't really know the mechanics of what how the universe was created, because after all, through the I guess you could call it the Big Bang theory, so to speak. You know, there was nothing, or not even nothing was there, and then all of a sudden there was everything. Okay, and basically science talks about the fact, oh, it goes through certain stages or time, etc., that it created everything. Okay, and so it was, even though science says the fact that, oh, it's within a short period of time it does this, etc. It progresses through from nothingness to everythingness. It does it very, I guess you could say, quickly, because after all, based on what science says, and so therefore, the long the part that we see, which is the physical world, okay, basically is something that's been there for a long time. Okay, according to science, basically it's for that 13.57 billion years or whatever. Okay, and that's basically how long the universe, is at, or the age of the universe is at. Okay, so the whole idea is the fact that, yeah, this thing that we call the Tao is not something that we can really describe, and so therefore it is also and even the mechanics of how that creation is delved or derived is really not easily understood. Yeah, in fact, I think in one of the sermons, the God has said that, even Buddhists are trying to understand this whole aspect of this, whether the Tao came from nothing to everything, is something that even the Buddhists are not really, I guess you could say, able to comprehend, or also to be able to tell or teach to others. Okay. Then of course, Tao is in the heavens. It is the driving force. Okay. And then it talks about, the days are clear and all the stars and the planets revolve in their orbits. Okay, which makes sense because we see this whole mechanics of this solar system, or the revolution of the planets in this system. Basically, that's what we see. Okay, and so therefore it moves all constantly smoothly. When the Tao is in the earth, the lands are formed. The whole idea is the fact that, yeah, once when the Tao, well, I, I just use the word Tao, but it really needs to be a little bit more elaborate. I mean, it should be elaborated on, because after all, the whole idea of the the stars in the sky, or the planets in the heavens, so to speak, and also the idea of the uh, 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 Tao in the lands, Earth is basically when he talks about the land is formed, the soul, mountains and rivers, etc. Basically, that's the aspect that's talking about um, the I guess you could say the geography of this planet, Okay, and it talks about, the whole idea that, I mean, we know through science that, there's something called plate tectonics. Okay, and the whole idea that that's the reason why we have earthquakes, volcanoes, etc. Okay, and so therefore, if we really understand all these things, then we can basically sort of understand what it means about, the Tao in heaven and also the Tao in the earth. And then, of course, then it talks about the Tao's in the heaven, basically physical beings combined with a mental and spiritual being. He has life and then can feel and move. Okay, so when the fact that we have this nature, or this Tao itself in us, it means the fact that this physical self can basically think and move. All right, and so therefore it is that which it is to, it's because this Tao, or this what we now call the Buddha nature, of course, is what gives this physical life, I guess you could say, existence. Okay, that this person can think and move. Okay, or feel and move. Okay. Okay, then because I'm running out of time. Okay, so therefore, then of course he talks about the fact that all the especially the three particular religions, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. The reason why they talk about that is only because of the fact that they want to talk about the fact that we have a particular aspect in ourselves. Okay, and Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism talks about different aspects of this nature that we have. Okay, the Taoist talks about what's called the Jingdan. The Buddhist calls it what's called Sariputta, and of course, the true nature is what Confucius calls it. Okay, and we just basically calls it the Buddha nature. We just basically calls it the Buddha nature. Okay, so basically those are three things, and these things just means the fact that they're the ones that gives us the the uh, the existence or the life that we have. Okay. Okay, being aligned to the Tao will lead to the realization of all dharmas, because hundreds of thousands of sutras and holy scriptures are all based on this universal principle. Okay, so the idea is the fact that we have, in fact, once we have this something that's physical, okay, and therefore we have this nature within us, okay, then we become alive. And when we have the ability to be alive, then of course we now have the ability to know these things. Whether we he calls it the realization of all dharmas. It just means the fact that all these dharmas, whether it's like writings or holy scriptures, it's all based on the fact that all this thing comes from the fact that we, through this physical form, we have this ability. And this ability, of course, comes from what? The original name, or the I guess you could say the Tao itself, because after all, that's what gives us what's called we call it the Buddha nature, or the Jingdan, or the Sariputta, or the true nature. Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. Okay. 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 And then, of course, it talks about the fact that, the teachings, I mean, over time, basically, a lot of the teachings of the sages and the scriptures or whatever, basically, they talk about the fact that we need to go to know this nature, okay, so that we can become enlightened, okay. And the fact that through I highlight the fact that it goes up to now, there have been 3,000 years where nobody has been awakened to the truth, and all of mankind have been distracted from it and confused by many false teaching. Okay, the 3,000 year really means the fact that there is really, from the beginning of the time that I guess you could say mankind emerged into this cycle, to the time now. Okay, so basically that's up, the whole idea of 3,000 years just to represent it's a long period of time. Okay, and in the Chinese basically use like the idea of the 3,000 years or 3,000 days or whatever it is, basically just to let us notify that to remind us the fact that it is a long period of time. Now it is time for the universal salvation assigned by heaven. Okay, and basically this means the fact that when we are now in this period of the white era, and so therefore in this era, basically we have the ability to really receive the Tao and also to practice the Tao and eventually become enlightened on the Tao. And of course, in that time, we need to sort of like do a lot of cultivation. Okay, not only cultivate ourselves, our inner selves, but also have all the cultivation in terms of performing merits, etc. Because after all, we don't know what the idea is, the fact that there's a lot of karma that's past karma that's within us, so to speak, and so therefore we need to sort of like get rid of that or to lessen that. Okay, and of course there's something called what's called the Longhua Assembly that's held, and that's when it's a time when at the end where we have sort of like near the end period of time, at the end of the time, I guess the end of the last this white period, okay, because after the white period, we don't know what period it'll be called, but of course, after there's what 10,800 years, okay, that we have this white period, okay, time frame, and after the white period time frame, we have what is called a period that's behind that, and that's basically the time in which that we have I guess you could say the not the receiving, but the diminishing. I'll call it the diminishing of humankind. Okay, diminishing of humankind. Okay, so it just means the fact that there's a lot of things that will happen through this white period and also the period after that, and so therefore in that through that through this white period and the time after, there will be a lot of reduction or the diminishing of mankind itself. All right, I don't want to get into too much detail. Okay. So therefore, however, for who can be enlightened to the golden path. Okay, and basically that means the fact that when we now have through the white period, we have matriarch, 17 patriarch, and then also the 18th patriarch and matriarch. And basically he's talking mainly about the Master Zhang, which is the patriarch. Of course, the matriarch is also included within that phrase, and it just means the fact that we're able to receive the Tao, and therefore through this Tao, through our cultivations or our efforts in cultivation, then we can, of course, eventually rid ourselves of all the things that we had, the luggage that we had carried in the past, and so therefore we were able to be, I guess you could say, more enlightened. Okay, and so therefore we're able to achieve what is called in what I mentioned earlier about the Longhua Assembly. That's when we get all the, I guess you could say, the positions. Okay, through our efforts to do the cultivation to sort of like attain the certain position. Okay, all right, or certain status. Okay, so in human life, and then he talks about the fact that human life is like a grain of sand. It's it is small and which follows the ups and downs of the world in the world life and personal life, and unable to distinguish the east and the west. It just means the fact that most of the time we are very confused. Okay, in fact, we had that 3,000, you mentioned earlier, the 3,000 years. Okay, it really means the fact that the long period of time from the emergence of mankind to the end of mankind, basically, that's what he's talking about, the 3,000 years. And so therefore, we sort of like, I don't want to say devolve, but we sort of like devolve in the sense, or we lost track of what our true nature is. Okay, and of course, we go through the human. In terms of humans, basically, we talk about where's the 7 emotions and also the 6 desires. Okay, and basically, it just means the fact that we sort of go through the up and downs of life, and then it's because we do that we sort of like lose sight of the fact that hey, yeah, there's an origin that we have. That's the true nature, and that we need to really find. And if we find or know the fact that we do have this nature, then of course we have the ability, or I guess you could say, if you are willing, you are able to really eventually escape, or not escape, but transcend, so to speak, the cycle of life and death. Okay. All right. And basically, you can read on the note. It's the same thing as what I discussed earlier. Okay, and of course, then it goes a lot more into in terms about the fact that in terms of the human existence or human condition. Okay, and you can read it because it's just talking about the fact that everything has its cause and effect, and therefore it then through this causes and effect basically also creates karma. And so therefore you need with this and once we go through the various lives in terms of the karma, essentially it will can influence ourselves so that we are can sometimes still get confused or uncertain about what we want to do, and also our own lives. Okay, so I wanted to cut it short to make it quick, because after all, he basically talks a little bit about the life, the human condition itself, the the idea of like, your own life, and also the fact that you go through a lot of the physical life itself. Okay, and the whole idea is the fact that he's trying to just say the fact God wants to say the fact that you have a birth, and eventually you have death. And the whole idea that all these aspects of life, basically, goes over in a like in a flash. Okay, and so therefore, it's important that you make the time that you have once you understand or realize the Tao, so to speak, to be able to change your fate and also your destiny, and also eventually, hopefully, become enlightened. Okay. 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 Tens of thousands of years since the Yin Hui, which is where mankind was created. Okay, so basically that talks about the different periods of time. Okay, and basically the the suffering and birth of reincarnation have been overwhelming, miserable, causing much grief. Worst of all, the most of the souls of the reincarnates, the deeper it becomes lost and the more it is contaminated. So that's important. The fact that once we constantly, when we don't know about the Tao, we go through reincarnation. Now it could be incarnated an animal or whatever, or non-human. Okay, and so therefore, when we go through these many reincarnations, the more, I guess you could say, deeper, but as God says, the more deeper it loses ourselves, and it gets contaminated only because of the fact that it's sort of like saying the more the next life, so to speak, we sort of like carry the luggage of the past, so to speak. Okay, all right. In fact, mankind comes from same origin. Okay, and basically he just wraps up by saying that mankind comes from the same origin. Okay, Tao, and basically the the souls of all the people, every people, is no different than the souls of saints and Buddhas. Okay, so therefore, each soul is equivalent to each other soul. There's no more soul in saints and less in commoners. So the whole idea is the fact that we are basically equal. That's the reason why when Fixed Patriarch was talking about the fact that the word 功德 or merit, because after all, it can be broken into two, to the fact that we have ultimate equanimity between ourselves or each other, each one of us. Okay. And to really wrap it up. Okay. So saints and Buddhas are, okay. And then basically this the fact that saints and Buddhas have once been humans themselves. No one is born a saint or sage. Therefore, all of you, the children of Lao Mu, should realize the fact that what is true and what is false. Awaken to the fact that you have been lost and that you should sincerely worship the heavenly decree, enlightened masters. That's to receive the Tao, okay, and to make a good plan for your life. Basically, to plan out your life. The fact that hey, once you receive the Tao, you need to do what you need to do, you need to cultivate, so to speak, so that you can eventually rid yourself of all these things that you have, the luggage that you have brought, so to speak, and therefore go back to your original nature. Okay, so therefore recover your original nature. Do not waste time. And basically, God is basically saying the fact that yeah, you need to really understand what this nature really is. The Buddha, I'll call it, yeah, it's now the Buddha, I'll call it the Buddha nature. Okay, it's the same thing as the natures that Confucius and the Buddhists and the Taoists have said. Okay, and once you understand your Buddha nature or know your Buddha nature, then you realize the fact that yeah, all these past lives, reincarnation, whatever reincarnation you have passed in the past, all these things can still have influences on yourself, because after all, that's what we call karma. Okay, and so therefore, if you can really do the merits and and manifest the virtues of the Tao itself, this way you can minimize, not to get rid of, but at least minimize the karmic aspects of your past. And so therefore, if we can really do that, then of course you can hopefully become what's called enlightened. Okay, as like the saints, sages, and Buddhas that has been enlightened. Okay, and so therefore, basically, yeah, that sort of like summarizes what the third sermon or the warning is saying, and just basically it's to say the fact that yeah, in this particular sermon, basically it's talking about the fact that the Tao is true, principles is true, and the mandate is true. The mandate is basically the fact that we have gone through this many reincarnations, and through this fact that we have the people or the masters who can provide us the opening of our true nature or the gate, so to speak. And so therefore, this way, through that, we can then try to recover or to, I guess you could say, know more about ourselves. And if you can do that, then of course, hopefully through your efforts, you can become enlightened and also make use of your existing life. Okay, and basically that sort of like summarizes what this third warning is. And basically, if I said anything wrong, and I hope the saints and Buddhists will forgive me for what I've said. If I basically misinterpreted what God was said to the writings, I hope that also God can forgive me for my misinterpretation. Thank you very much for listening to this class.